Uh-oh. Motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It would appear that Spain's own EBU featherweight champion Tania Alvarez will be defending the blue belt against the United Kingdom's own Healy in Barcelona.
Crawford.
Tania Alvarez, you might be familiar with that name. That's the same Tania Alvarez that fought Sky Nicholson some fights and some time ago, sporting a professional record of 12 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 13 professional bouts. She has since rebounded off that loss to Sky Nicholson in February of 2023. Currently, she's on a 5-fight winning streak and has since become featherweight EBU champion, the Navy blue belt, and she'll be defending it against Healy, what is her mandatory challenger to that title. Healy, you may be familiar with that name. That's the same Healy that challenged Nina Hughes for what was then Nina Hughes' WBA title. Nina beat her, gave her lone defeat, sporting a professional record of 9 wins with 1 loss, no draws, no recorded knockouts, having never been knocked out in 10 professional bouts.
Wasn't that fight at bantamweight?
Yes, it was, and it would seem that Healy has since moved up in weight, toggling between super bantam and feather. This fight is a featherweight contest.
Feather.
Healy, who has since rebounded off that loss to Nina Hughes in June of 2023, she's fought 3 times since then and won 3 fights since then. Having seen action 2 times last year, last in action in November, she won't have any ring rust or cobwebs that she needs to shake off. And the same applies to Tania. She last saw action in that same month, in November. She also saw action 2 times last year.
They're on the same schedule.
Edge goes to the champion, edge goes to Tania Alvarez, because we already saw another version of this fight when Katie fought Nina Hughes. Nina Hughes, like Tania, is a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, an aggressive one. I will say that Nina is a more well-schooled boxer than Tania Alvarez. Tania still is very rough around the edges, but I think she wins the fight for the same reason Nina won the fight, because she's going to crowd Healy. Healy, statuesque fighter, at least for these weights, long and limber. Not a bad boxer, but she needs room to work, and Tania's not going to give her that. Nina didn't give her that. Tania won't give her that.
And it doesn't help that Tania will have home field advantage. Remember, the fight is happening in Barcelona, Spain, where Tania is from. She'll have home field advantage.
And all the consideration from the judges that I think she will win a points decision off aggression, off of activity. I don't trust that Healy will be able to keep her off and keep it a clean boxing match, neat and tidy. No, sir. I think it's going to be rough and tumble, how Tania likes it.
Very young, and she's developing a following in her native Spain.
I think it helps that she's very easy on the eyes, and she's an action fighter like Kiko Martinez is an action fighter, one of the more aggressive fighters Spain has ever produced.
Tania's cut from that same cloth. That's how she likes to go about fighting a fight, though she's very rough around the edges, needs a lot of work. You could argue that she should probably train abroad.
She's got a good thing going, but it's very much insulated, and to become a world-level fighter, a world-class fighter, that's a step I think she needs to take. See a lot of other female fighters do it. Mizuki Hiruta of Japan training with Manny Robles. We see Costa Rica's own Yo Castavalle. She's training with Panda Nahar.
It helps.
Maybe that's something Tania Alvarez will do at some point down the line. For now, I expect her to hang on to her blue belt. I expect her to hang on to the EBU title. Tania Alvarez on points is the pick.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Another look at the linear and skewed perspectives of those who still go to bat for Al Haymon's failing PBC.
My previous video, we had an extended conversation based on statements made by one Remy, one of the guys who's known on the Twitter Spaces, who said PBC's only been around since 2015 and somehow managed to bring the biggest pay-per-views since.
No, they haven't.
Somehow they are responsible for ruining the sport of boxing according to certain fans. Exactly what was top-ranked Golden Boy, Queensberry, and Matchroom doing all those years?
Let's have a look.
Starting from 2015, what was Golden Boy doing? Golden Boy put together the Canelo versus Cotto fight that sold 900,000 pay-per-views.
What was the PBC doing around that time?
And how many of the pay-per-views that the PBC put out there hit a number like that? 900,000. That wasn't even Golden Boy Promotions' biggest pay-per-view. 600,000 with Amir Khan, 900,000 with Miguel Cotto, 1 million with Chavez, over 1 million with Golovkin.
Over 1 million again in the rematch.
You asked what they were doing around that time. That's what they were doing.
Better numbers than the PBC were doing then, better numbers than the PBC are doing now.
How many of the PBC's pay-per-views that they put out hit the 600,000 mark, the 900,000 mark, the million mark? By my count, they've only ever done that once.
Davis versus Garcia.
That hit 1 million, but they didn't do it alone. It still involved a Golden Boy Promotions fighter, Ryan Garcia. Without him, Gervonta Davis never came close to hitting 1 million pay-per-view buys, not even 500,000.
And he's not about to.
Since you ask, what was Golden Boy Promotions doing around that time? What was Matchroom doing around that time? Breaking records with Anthony Joshua, breaking pay-per-view records, selling out stadiums.
That's what they were doing.
Spearheading the effort to popularize women's boxing, which they did, expanding their enterprise to foreign markets, not limited to the United Kingdom. That's what they were doing.
And they succeeded.
Where Al Haymon failed, or did you forget that they tried to expand to the UK market with what was supposed to be a landmark ITV deal that only lasted one fight?
Did you forget?
DeGale versus Eubank, what was supposed to be Al Haymon's UK takeover, ended before it even started.
That's what was going on.
And that's what Matchroom's been doing since then, expanding their enterprise, expanding to other territories, helping to popularize women's boxing where Al has no women boxers and never did.
Doing the very first big-time boxing matches in Saudi Arabia. Or did you forget that Joshua versus Ruiz 2 was in Saudi?
Joshua versus Usyk 2 was in Saudi. Bivol versus Zerto was in Saudi.
That's what they've been doing since 2015. What has Al been doing since 2015?
Inundating the market with overpriced pay-per-views, getting kicked off of Fox, then subsequently getting kicked off of Showtime. That's what he's been up to.
Queensberry.
Oh, I wouldn't be too hard on Queensberry. What have they been doing since 2015? They picked up Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury, who destroyed.
You must have forgot that circa 2017-2018, Queensberry Promotions decides to sign Tyson Fury, who was on the comeback trail, and they helped to put together Wilder versus Fury, which greatly helped to reanimate Tyson Fury's career.
Reanimate Queensberry, who were falling behind in the UK boxing scene to Matchroom that was emerging as the premier promoter in that market.
That's what they were doing.
To eventually go on to have one of the strongest heavyweight stables in boxing today. What's the PBC heavyweight stable looking like?
Top Rank.
I wouldn't be too hard on Top Rank. They did a fantastic job of using their landmark ESPN deal to bring regular fights on a regular schedule to boxing fans without that many overpriced pay-per-views. Quite honestly, Top Rank did a fantastic job of bringing you boxing on a regular basis that didn't cost an arm and a leg, and they did that for 8 years.
They also co-promoted Tyson Fury and the Tyson Fury versus Wilder rematch. Did you forget?
The rematch, the trilogy, you think they weren't involved in that?
Selective memory.
While you tell tall tales about the PBC putting out the biggest and best pay-per-views, to what pay-per-views are you referring to?
They only ever did 1 million buys with a pay-per-view once, and they needed a Golden Boy Promotions fighter to do it.
The rest of that schlock they were putting out struggled to do 300,000 buys. Most of that stuff.
It's the same way now.
Oh, you guys get out the potato chips and soda with the confetti, because David Benavidez did 160,000 buys.
Wow.
Me try not to sprain my ankle falling out of my chair with how impressed I am by those numbers. 3 pay-per-view appearances, and that's what he's doing?
Wow.
You're living in La La Land, my friend. You, any other Haymonites, because you don't end up getting kicked off of NBC, Fox, and Showtime, all these major broadcasters, based on what a good job you're doing. How
many shows you doing now? How many shows did they do last year? What was it, 5? Down from 17 or 18?
They are as successful and as big as you say they are. Why are they doing less shows than everybody else? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Another Twitter user that goes by the name Android Uppercut said none of the major promoters have been able to reach the mainstream at all.
Is he on drugs?
Yet PBC gets unwarranted hate for actually bringing boxing to the masses. So this is what we like to call in psychology Dunning-Kruger syndrome, to where the most unqualified individuals greatly overestimate their abilities when you see this many would-be boxing analysts and their skewed perception of things.
It's almost like they're on a different planet or a parallel universe, because in what universe is the PBC bringing boxing to the masses? Virtually everything they do is behind a paywall. That's the opposite of bringing boxing to the masses.
And all of these overpriced shows is what spawned the pay-per-view piracy you now see in boxing that is out of control. That relationship is symbiotic. The more fights you put behind a paywall, the more of a demand for illegal streams you spawn.
That's their fault.
They did that. In the last 8 or 9 years, who's been putting out more pay-per-views in this country than the PBC?
Nobody.
So what you have here are the least qualified individuals to speak on a matter over subjects that are way over their head and way above their pay grade.
Basically.
You expect a bunch of guys who can't read above the 9th grade level to understand the intricacies of the business of boxing and how net works.
3 of them in America, 4 if we count ITV in the UK.
They're gonna bring up ESPN. They're gonna bring up ESPN as a whataboutism.
That's just one network.
If you're telling me that's a bad thing, isn't it then worse that 4 networks have pulled out on the PBC? 4. NBC, Fox, Showtime, and ITV in the UK.
Isn't that worse?
Kind of logic that these guys exercise isn't logic at all. It's illogical.
It's the opposite of logic. It's emotion. They have an emotional attachment to Al Heyman, who they view as a prodigal father.
The fairy god boxing theory. It's gonna swoop in with the milk and eggs and make everything right.
Delusional.
You can't have a logical debate with these illogical people, and I suggest you don't. All you can do is point the holes, point out the inconsistencies, the pitfalls in everything they're saying.
You can study them, but you can't debate them, as it would be tantamount to debating a pigeon.
Oh, your fantastic arguments and facts and stats will fall on deaf ears while the pigeon struts around like he owns the place. Because these are bird brains. Do you really think that these guys were shelling out $80 at a time, $80 every single time that Al Heyman put an overpriced fight behind a paywall? They weren't. Simultaneously, they're telling me and you about all the great fights the PBC put together. Not great enough that you were spending your money?
Bringing boxing to the masses?
You going up to bat for Al Heyman as much as you do is you trying to stay on some kind of code that the rest of the world doesn't give a shit about. We're just here for boxing.
I don't give a shit about your code.
Nobody does. NBC didn't, Fox didn't, Showtime, ITV, none of them cared because we're here for boxing.
You must be here for something else.
Delusions of grandeur and false equivalency arguments all falling on deaf ears because you don't need to be Burt Sugar to see PBC's been an abject failure.
It's not rocket science.
On to more pressing news. According to the Bible of Boxing, Ring Magazine states Teofimo Lopez deal is close to headlining a Ring Magazine card in Alcatraz.
Going to assume this could be for the Richardson-Hitchens fight that Teofimo Lopez has been calling for, though it could be somebody else.
Ring has learned that a deal is close for the Ring WBO Junior Welterweight Champion Teofimo Lopez to return to action on a date in June or July as the headliner of a special Ring Magazine event. No opponent has been finalized at the moment. The Ring has 2 events already scheduled in the coming months, but the Lopez card would have a very unique setting. Alcatraz, prison,
where Teofimo belongs.
As he is criminally stupid and says criminally stupid things, Lopez's return would be the first of a 3-fight collaboration with Top Rank, with the first bout under the Ring Magazine banner and his next 2 in-ring appearances being part of Riyadh season events.
The famed penitentiary Alcatraz now operates as a museum, sort of a sightseeing tour. There won't be any actual prisoners there.
Turki Alalshikh, the head of Riyadh season and chairman of the General Entertainment Authority, recently told ESPN.com's Mike Kopinger during a wide-ranging interview that he hopes to stage a boxing event sometime this year at the long-closed federal penitentiary. What do you think if there is an event in Alcatraz one day, Alalshikh asked Kopinger. It is like a museum now, you know. Sometimes I get in my mind I want different places to do fights. Sometimes in mountains, maybe someday in the pyramids in Mexico, someday at the Eiffel Tower in France, the Colosseum in Italy. Do you understand this concept?
I do.
By staging boxing matches in exotic and sexy places.
Alcatraz is not sexy, but the Eiffel Tower.
The Colosseum, unconventional sites and locations for staging a boxing match, which would in effect add to their allure, their appeal, not dissimilar from what you got from old video games like Street Fighter.
And remember, Ring Magazine has partnered up with SNK, so it's in keeping with that theme.
Sort of a creamy center to unite two different worlds, the world of boxing and the world of video games.
They really do sort of gel when you think about it.
Alcatraz was a maximum security federal prison on Alcatraz Island where a lot of guys got punched in the brown. Off the coast of San Francisco, California, the main prison building was built in 1910 to 1912. The prison closed in 1963, but Alcatraz was reopened as a public museum. It is one of San Francisco's major tourist attractions, attracting some 1.5 million visitors annually. Lopez, 21-1, fits right in.
Come on.
He last fought in June of last year when he picked up a 12-round unanimous decision win over Steve Claggett, but the caveat is, if his ring return is scheduled to go down in June or July, anywhere around there, he'll be a year out from his last fight and will have amassed considerable ring rust, which is less than ideal for a Richardson-Hitchens fight. Stylistically, that's not a good fight for Teofimo. Richardson-Hitchens brings to the table all of the elements that Teofimo struggles with. So maybe they should go with somebody else. My recommendation, they should go with Mario Barrios.
And we've been all through that several times.
Reimagining the sport of boxing, that's what Turkey's doing by going with these exotic locations, strange and sometimes sexy sights to stage a fight.
Innovation.
That's what boxing needs in this brave, new, digital world. Innovation, something else, something new, something extra.
There's too many dinosaurs in the sport of boxing, too many fossils, too many relics of the past. I mean, look at the boxing judges and the median age for a boxing judge, the median age for a referee.
Think about the established game in town, the outfits, and how long they've been in the sport, to where when you do a job for too long, after a while, you just start going through the motions.
How so many people in boxing rely on the same tired old tropes and the same tired old shtick. How Al Heyman,
Him again.
still trying to replicate the Mayweather formula and treat every single fight like it's Mayweather versus De La Hoya.
Same tired old formula that pits a black fighter versus a Mexican fighter in the hopes that it will replicate the success that fight had so many years ago. That's not the case, and you can't force it. No new ideas is what I'm getting at.
These guys ain't got no new ideas, no innovation. Turkey does.
I very much like the concept of staging big-time boxing matches at exotic locations because it makes for even more of a spectacle. Of course, you can do a boxing match at the MGM Grand
The Madison Square Garden.
or the T-Mobile Arena, but that is all run-of-the-mill. That is what you're used to. Whereas this break from normalcy can help to shake things up the same way that a new hairstyle might make you want to impregnate your wife of many, many years.
Same woman, different look.
It'll get you frisky, and this might give the boxing fans the proverbial boner that they're looking for.
Hey, can you use some better parallels, please?
You get the gist of it.